If you're watching this video, you're probably looking for some high yield dividend stocks. And one that's popped up on your radar is Algonquin Power, the Canadian utility. Here's the thing. There's bad news for shareholders of that company with its dividend that you may not have noticed if you're not paying enough attention. I'm Jason Hall. This is The Smattering, and I'm here with Tyler Crow to talk about what's going on with Algonquin. Hey, Tyler.
How's it going, Jason? You always needed some esoteric mention of a Canadian-based utility. So he's like, oh yeah, let's get Tyler on the horn.
Well, this is one that I've actually followed a little bit because I own Atlantica Sustainable Infrastructure, which is the renewable power. But nonetheless, they did kind of bury this in their announcement. But before we get into it, I just want to remind the folks watching, we get to make these videos because of our partnership with The Motley Fool. The Motley Fool can help you be a better investor. If you want to get some free stock picks, go to our special link, fool.com/The Smattering for more on that. All right, Tyler, let's talk about Algonquin. What's going on here?
It's one of those ones where, people that are hunting for yield, hunting for stability, hunting for dividends in a time where, everyone's a little shaky about the market right now. Well, if you go to Yahoo Finance right now, Algonquin Power says that its dividend is yields 9.8%. Well, unfortunately, that's not the case because they significantly cut their dividend or plan to. And that was an announcement that they made back on January 12th. This is the first quarter 2023 dividend. So the April payment that will land in people's paychecks will be considerably smaller. The quarterly dividend used to be 18.08 cents. For the April one, it's going to be 10.85 cents. It's indicative of why all these screeners are showing it as this super high yield business when it's not. It's the yield today is much closer to like 5.5%, 6%. And it's indicative of, what has been going on at Algonquin Power lately. A lot of people are going to go, well, why? This is it's been a fast growing business. Cash flow has been growing really well. Earnings have been growing rather steadily. They're making acquisitions like the Kentucky Power acquisition it's about to make. As you mentioned, Atlantica Yield, it has this fast growing yield co that it's got. All these things would be indicative of, a company that's doing well, right? Well, one of the things that you really have to think about when you're making investments, it's not just growth, it's how you get that growth matters. And not just in the sense of what you're buying and the returns on what you're buying, but how you're financing that. Because those are huge ways in which you can, even though it looks like revenue, EBITDA, all these things are growing, you're actually destroying value. And that's kind of been a little indicative of what has happened a bit in Algonquin over the past 10 years. So over the past 10 years, their cash flow from operations has grown 1,000%. That looks awesome. But if you break it down on a per share basis, that number is only 188%. So basically, that 1,000 means nothing to the shareholder.
It's all about cash flow per share.
Yeah, your portion of that growth is a fraction because there has been so much dilution of the stock over time that it's not as attractive. To give a counterexample, we're going to use probably one of the better operators. It's not a high yield business or anything like that. NextEra Energy, another utility, a little bit faster growing. But if you do that same comparison over that 10-year period, cash flow from operations for NextEra Energy, it's up 94%. Clearly not as good, right? But on a per share basis, it's up 65%. So even though it's been growing slower, the rate at which its per share number is growing is much more commensurate with how its cash flow from operations is growing, which means that it's more likely on a more sustainable model.
But I think the key here, Tyler, right, is you look at the rapid growth of the dividend over the past decade. This basically wipes out 5 years of dividend growth. Chances are they're not just cutting it just to reinstitute a high rate of growth next year. Investors should reset their expectations about its ability to grow its dividend going forward too.